There was a stretch, not long ago, well within a single lifetime, when the people who study matter for a living had a genuinely absurd problem on their hands. They were finding new particles faster than they could name them. They burned through the ordinary words, then started handing out plain letters. And then, I am not making this up, they reached for the Greek alphabet, the pi and the mu and the lambda and all the rest of it, and started running low on those too. Running low on letters. That is not a sentence you ever expect to hear about the smallest things in the universe.
It really did happen, more or less exactly like that. And there is a helpless quality in the naming that tells you the whole story before we say another word. You only ransack an entire alphabet when the things keep arriving and will not stop coming. And they would not stop.
I keep snagging on that one image. The sharpest people alive, sat round a table, seriously arguing over whether there is a spare Greek letter left to hand out. That is not a golden age. That is a filing crisis.
It is a filing crisis wearing the costume of a golden age. And from the inside, the two feel identical, right up until the moment they suddenly do not.
All right, but put a rough size to it for me. When you say they kept coming, do you mean a handful? A dozen surprises spread across the years, one every so often, enough to keep it interesting over a career?
Well past 100, and still climbing while people stood there watching it happen.
100. New kinds of particle.
Well past 100. And here is the part that ought to stop you flat. Every last one of them was being filed under the same word. Elementary. A building block. The bottom of the world. Nothing smaller inside. More than 100 different, smallest things.
Wait, that is the bit that will not sit flat, and I cannot even tell you yet why. 100 smallest things. You say it slowly and it starts to sound like a joke where somebody forgot the ending.
It is not a joke, but you have put your thumb on the precise spot where something has gone wrong. You are allowed a few building blocks. You are not allowed 100 of them. Somewhere inside that one sentence, a word quietly snaps in half, and the whole season we are starting tonight grows straight out of that snap.
Then I want to back all the way up because to feel why 100 is a scandal, I first have to remember when the world was simple. And there genuinely was a moment when it was simple, wasn't there? When you could have written the whole of matter on the back of one hand and had room left over.
There was, and it was glorious while it lasted. Cast yourself back to the tidy years. If someone asked you what everything is made of, everything, the chair, the sea, the star, your own hand, the honest answer was short enough to say between two breaths. Essentially 4 pieces.
4, only 4. Give me the 4.
The electron, the tiny light one, the faint outer haze of every atom carrying the negative charge. The proton, heavy, sitting down in the core, carrying the positive. The neutron, just as heavy, right there beside the proton in the core, but carrying no charge at all, a sort of neutral twin. And then, for the 4th, the photon, the particle of light itself.
And I want to make sure I have the shares straight, because this is the bit that felt so finished. Every atom in the whole periodic table, every element there is just the first 3 of those. A little clump of protons and neutrons in the middle, a haze of electrons around it. That is it. That is an atom.
That is an atom. Top to bottom. Change nothing but the count. How many protons sit in the core, and you walk the entire table, from the lightest gas that floats to the heaviest metal that sinks. The whole marvelous variety of the elements is those 3 pieces, taken in different numbers. Nothing else added.
No secret extra ingredient then. No 101st thing you have to reach for to make gold instead of lead.
Not one. Change the count of protons, get a different element. That was the entire recipe. and standing there inside it, it truly felt like the finished floor of the world.
Which, now that I say it out loud, is already a little bit magical, and I want to flag it and come back to it. Nearly 100 different elements, and underneath them only 3 actual pieces. A few things, arranged in different amounts, making an enormous crowd. Hold that thought somewhere safe, because I have a strong feeling it is going to come back and bite us before the end of the night.
Hang it on the wall where we can both see it. You are right that it matters more than it looks right now, but let us finish the tidy picture first, because there is that 4th piece, and it is a different kind of thing from the other 3.
The photon, light, and that one is not sitting inside atoms holding matter together. It is the stuff we see by.
It is the messenger. No weight to it at all, never sits still for an instant, and it is what carries the push of the electric force from one charge across to another. Light, radio, the warmth coming off a fire, all of it, the same single 4th thing. So there is your world. 3 pieces to build the stuff, and a 4th to carry the light. You could genuinely list it on one hand and go home for the evening with time to spare.
And I want to sit in how satisfying that is, because we are about to lose it, and I want to have loved it first. That is a finished universe. It is almost boring, and I mean that as the highest compliment I can pay a theory. There is nothing left over, nothing dangling, no loose thread trailing off the edge. You could teach it to a child in an afternoon. Matter is these, light is that, good night, sleep well.
And there was one last flourish that made it feel more finished still. The very thing we spent the whole of last season closing on. We had just learned that none of those 4 is really a little hard ball, a marble you could paint and hold. Each one is a ripple. A field fills all of space, an electron field, a field of light, lying there flat and quiet, everywhere at once, and a particle is simply a ripple standing up in it. The electron is a ripple in the electron field. Light is a ripple in the field of light.
Which, weirdly, made the tidiness feel deeper rather than shakier. Because now it is not even 4 objects, it is a few fields laid across the whole of space, and the particles are just the ripples those fields can raise. 4 fields, 4 ripples, still something you could hold in a single thought.
Still one thought, and that is the world that was about to be blown wide open, because there is a sting in the tail of that idea. If a particle is nothing but a ripple in a field, then there ought to be a way to make a brand new one, to reach in and raise a ripple that was never there before. And somebody was about to find exactly that way.
Okay, so how does it break? What is the first crack in the plaster? Because a world that clean does not just fall apart on its own out of boredom, something has to walk in through the door.
2 things walk in through the door, near enough at the same time, and they never stop walking in for the rest of the story. The first one comes from straight overhead, from the sky. All day and all night, without a single pause, a fine rain is falling on you out of space. Particles pouring down through the roof, through you, into the ground beneath your feet.
A rain of particles, right now, coming down through the ceiling.
Through the ceiling, through your body, through the floor, every second of your entire life. Mostly you never feel it and never would. But catch that rain. Actually stop and look at what is coming down, and you find things in it that have no business being there at all. Bits that sit in no atom anywhere. Not the electron, not the proton, not the neutron. Strangers. Falling out of the sky onto our heads.
And these strangers in the rain, they are not some once-a-decade freak event. They come down steadily.
Steadily, ceaselessly, onto every one of us. The sky had been quietly posting us particles the tidy list forbade, for as long as there had been a sky to post them.
And that alone should have set off the alarm, shouldn't it, before anyone built anything, because your tidy list said there are 4 things, full stop, And here is a fifth just landing on the roof, uninvited, part of no atom in creation. Where is it even coming from?
From colossal, violent things happening very far away. That is the honest, short answer, and it is enough for us tonight. The point is only this. The sky was handing over particles that the tidy list had no drawer to put them in. That was the first spigot, and nobody could turn it off. And then human beings went and built the second one, and the second one is the one that truly opens the flood, because with it we learn to make the strangers ourselves, on purpose, on a bench, whenever we felt like it.
Now this I have to hear properly, because make a particle sounds like it should be flatly impossible. You cannot make an electron out of nothing. You told me yourself seasons ago, matter gets moved around, never manufactured. So how on earth do you conjure up a brand new one?
This is the piece we set up at the very end of last season, and it is the hinge the entire zoo swings on. So let me lay it down slowly and carefully. We built machines. Never mind the engineering, just hold the idea of the thing. Machines that take two perfectly ordinary particles, a couple of protons, say, and hurl them straight at each other. Harder and harder and harder still.
Fine. Two protons thrown together at a ferocious speed. They collide, and I would guess bits fly off? Splinters? The two protons crack apart like a pair of dropped plates, and you go picking through the shards to see what was inside.
That is exactly the wrong picture, and getting it wrong here means getting the whole rest of the story wrong. So hold very still for a moment. Nothing chips off. The new particles that come streaming out of that crash were not hiding inside the protons, like fragments waiting to be knocked loose. They are made, on the spot, out of the sheer energy of the collision itself.
Made out of? The energy. The energy of the crash becomes new stuff, new matter that was not there a heartbeat before.
The energy of the crash freezes into matter. That is the coin we spent all of last season learning to flip. That energy and mass are two faces of one single thing, and you are allowed to trade the one for the other. Pour enough motion into one tiny spot, slam it together fiercely enough, and that energy can set, harden, into a fresh particle that simply did not exist an instant earlier. Not chipped off anything. Conjured, bought outright with energy at the going rate.
Then smashing particles together is very nearly the worst name you could possibly give it. Nothing is being smashed open to show its insides.
That one word, smash, fools absolutely everyone. You are not cracking a thing open to peer at its guts. You are building things that were never there in the first place and settling the bill in pure energy.
Let me try to catch it with a picture, because I do not want to let this slide past as words. It is as if you took two cars and crashed them together so violently that a third car, a whole new car, engine and all, came flying out of the wreck, built entirely out of the noise and the heat and the speed of the smash. Not a door that fell off one of them, a new car made of the crash.
That is very close, and the strange feeling you get saying it is exactly the right thing to feel. Because in the world of cars, it is madness, and in the world of particles, it is Tuesday. It happens every time. The wreckage carries more than the two things you started with, because the crash paid in energy for extra.
So, the harder I throw them, the more raw energy I dump into that one spot, the more new matter can freeze out of it, and the heavier that new matter is allowed to be.
The harder the smash, the heavier the things you can call into being, and the more of them at once. And now feel how neatly that shakes hands with the very last idea we had before the lights went down last season. The ripple in the field. If every kind of particle is a ripple in its own field, lying flat across all of space, then making a new one is not carpentry at all. You are not gluing it together out of parts. You are dumping enough energy into one place to raise a ripple in a field that had been lying perfectly still.
So each brand new kind of particle is really some field getting poked awake for the very first time. There is a field out there we had simply never disturbed, lying flat and unnoticed since forever, and a hard enough collision reaches down and plucks it.
Plucks it, and up stands a particle nobody had ever met before. And here is where the tidy world begins, quietly, to drown. Because it turns out there are a great many fields out there lying flat, waiting their turn to be plucked. Far more than 4. The first uninvited guest, though, the one that first cracked the calm, was almost insulting in how pointless it looked.
Wait, you said a great many fields, lying flat waiting their turn. How many are we talking about? One whole field for every single kind of particle.
One field for each kind. That is the picture we walked in carrying. So 100 kinds means 100 fields, laid quietly under the floor of the world, which is its own scandal, of course. The very same one, wearing a different coat.
Go on then, introduce me to the first stranger, the one that started it.
A particle that is, in nearly every way you could think to test it, a dead copy of the electron. Same charge sitting on it, the negative, behaves the same, pushes and pulls the same, answers to the same forces. We call it the muon. Only, it is heavy. A good deal heavier than the electron. The same creature, scaled up. And it will not even stay. It stands up for the barest flicker of a moment and then falls to pieces.
It is just a fat electron then. A bigger, heavier copy of a thing we already had. That does nothing new.
That is very nearly the exact reaction it got at the time. It sits inside no atom. It builds nothing. It plays no part in the tidy machine at all. It is an electron's heavier cousin who turns up to the family dinner, eats his fill, contributes precisely nothing to the conversation, and then leaves early. And not one person at the table can tell you what he is actually for. The going summary, more or less, was, "Who ordered that?"
Who ordered that? Because that is genuinely the feeling of it, isn't it? The world was complete, the bill was paid, everyone had their coats on, and here comes a dish nobody asked for, carried out of the kitchen with a flourish. A second, heavier electron that the universe apparently just threw in for free, whether you wanted it or not.
Threw in, for no reason anybody could name, and with no job for it to do. And if the whole business had politely stopped there, at one unwanted extra, we would have shrugged, filed it under odd, and gone back to sleep. But it did not stop at 1. That is the whole thing. The muon was never the surprise. The muon was only the first drop.
So the muon was never really the surprise at all. It was the universe clearing its throat.
Clearing its throat to begin a very long sentence. And not one of us had the faintest idea, that first morning, quite how long the sentence was going to run.
And then it rains.
Then it pours. Every time a bigger, harder machine was built, it poured out still more kinds, and the sky kept posting its own down the chimney at the very same time, day and night, never letting up. Heavy ones, middling ones. A whole family that feel the fierce, short-range pull inside the nucleus, and so crowd together stickily, jostling. Names start getting handed out. The pion, then the kaon, and then more than you would readily believe, arriving so fast that simply keeping a tidy list of them stops being a thing a human being can do.
And a lot of these newcomers barely stick around at all, you said. They flash into being and then fall to pieces almost the same instant. Does that make them somehow less real, or just far harder to catch and to count?
Not one single scrap less real, only fleeting. And that is worth sitting with for a moment. Most of the zoo are nothing like the steady, stay-at-home proton that has been sitting quietly in your atoms since long before there was a planet here to stand on. They blink into the world, live for the barest flicker, and come apart again, which is part of why the counting ran so completely wild. You are not calmly cataloguing a settled population that would hold still for its portrait. You are trying to take a census of a crowd that kept being born and dying, over and over, while you counted.
And this is where I want a real physical sense of the volume, because more than you would believe is doing an enormous amount of quiet work in that sentence. We are not talking about the tidy four picking up a couple of lodgers and a house guest. We are talking about the four becoming
well over 100. A crowd, a mob, a throng you could no longer hold in one thought, or one hand, or one honest afternoon at the blackboard. The clean little universe you were mourning a minute ago, gone, buried, under a landslide of particles that nobody sent for and nobody could send back.
And there was no stopping point anywhere in sight. No moment where somebody could stand up and say, "Right, that is the last of them. We are complete again."
None ever came. Every time you were sure the list had finally closed for good, the sky, or some fresh machine, quietly posted another one through the door.
And every single one of them, I am guessing, still getting that same word stamped across its forehead on the way in the door.
Every single one. Stamped elementary. A building block. Another bottom of the world. And another, and another, and another after that.
Okay, before we get to why that word is the real crime, because I can feel it building under everything you are saying, I actually want to enjoy the sheer comedy of the naming for a minute, because you keep hinting at it, and it sounds genuinely, properly funny.
Oh, it is one of the great, quiet farces in the whole history of the subject, and it happens for the most human reason there is. When you have three of something precious, you name each one with enormous care. You feel almost reverent about it. These are the pieces of creation. You choose the words slowly. You sleep on it. But when you have 100 of them, and they are still coming through the door,
You stop feeling reverent.
you stop feeling reverent altogether. You start grabbing whatever is nearest to hand. The ordinary words go first, obviously. Then you start spending plain letters. Then the letters wear thin, and you cross over into the Greek alphabet. Pi, mu, lambda, sigma, and on down the line. And then, and I promise you this is true, people begin decorating the Greek letters with little marks and dashes and stars, just to tell one incoming flood of near-identical cousins from the next.
It is exhausted parents naming the 10th child, isn't it? The first one, you agonize for 9 months. You consult both sets of grandparents. You test how it sounds shouted across a park. By the 10th, you are looking blearily around the room going, "The lamp. Fine, we will name this one after the lamp." It is honestly a wonder they did not start naming particles after the people down the corridor.
Out the window, down the corridor, after whatever is nearest to hand. Dignity is always the very first thing to go.
And somewhere underneath all that shrugging, nobody quite stops to say the obvious thing out loud. How can there possibly be this many of something that is meant to be the last word on everything?
There is real fatigue baked straight into the labels. You can hear it if you listen. And here is the turn, the exact place where the comedy curdles, because it curdled for them too, in real time. At first, every new one is a thrill. You found another one. Champagne, telegrams, marvelous, well done everyone. And then, somewhere part way up the pile, the feeling flips clean over.
To, "Oh no, not another one."
To, "Oh no, not another one." The exact same event. A fresh particle stands up out of some field, and all the delight has drained out of it and left plain dread sitting there instead. Because each new arrival is not filling in the picture anymore. Each new one is making the picture worse.
And now say the real problem plainly. the one sitting underneath the laugh, because I think I have finally got hold of it. It is not that there are a lot of them. Lots of things is fine. Stars, grains of sand, blades of grass. Nobody panics about those. It is the word. It is that every one of these 100 and more is being called elementary.
That is the whole of it. That is the wound under the comedy. So set the farce gently to one side. The real trouble is one single word, applied 100 times over. Which means we had better be brutally honest about what that word actually means. Because the entire scandal lives inside its meaning.
Do it. What does elementary actually claim? When a physicist stamps that word onto a particle, what exactly are they promising me?
Take anything at all and start cutting it down. Your chair, cut it and you get pieces of wood. Cut the wood fine enough and you reach the molecules. Take a single molecule apart and you find atoms sitting there. Crack open an atom and there are your protons, your neutrons, your electrons. Every single cut, all the way down, hands you a smaller part waiting inside. Elementary is simply the name for where that cutting stops.
The floor, the place where you cut and there is nothing inside to find. The blade meets no seam.
The floor of the world. No inside, no smaller parts, no seam anywhere to get the knife into. You have struck the true bottom, the thing that everything else is built out of, which is itself built out of nothing at all. That is the promise sealed inside the word. And now hear the part that matters more than any of it. The whole force of that promise is that there should be very, very few of them.
Right, because the entire appeal of a bottom is that it is small. A short list, something you could hold in your head with room left over for lunch. That was the quiet beauty of the four. You had reached the floor, and the floor had almost nothing standing on it.
And notice which way the good discoveries had always run, right up until this. Every genuine step downward, deeper into matter, had made the list shorter, never once longer. The endless zoo of everyday substances collapsed down onto the molecules. The molecules collapsed onto 100-odd elements, and then the elements themselves collapsed onto just 3 little pieces, in the core and in the cloud. Down had always meant fewer.
So the particle pile is the very first time in the whole story that going deeper made the list explode outward instead of quietly shrinking down. That is the wrong direction entirely, the exact opposite of every step before it. And that, all on its own, before you have said another word about watches or gears, that is the alarm going off.
A short list is not some pleasant bonus feature of the word elementary. A short list is the whole point of it. It is what the word is for. A tiny handful of genuinely bottom pieces, and out of that handful, everything else in existence. So now, walk yourself back to the pile. More than 100 things, every one of them stamped as the floor of the world, the indivisible bottom, nothing inside. And it stops being a discovery at all. It becomes a contradiction, flat out, in broad daylight.
A contradiction. That is a hard, blunt word. You are pointedly not softening it to a puzzle or an intriguing surprise.
I will not soften it, because softening it is the exact mechanism by which the whole trouble got quietly waved through for as long as it did.
Say it to me as plainly as you possibly can. Why is that a contradiction and not merely a very long and inconvenient list?
Because 100 different indivisible bottoms is very nearly like saying 100 different smallest possible numbers. The words are quietly at war with one another. Try it as a watch instead. You crack open the back of a pocket watch, expecting a few kinds of gear, a small set of basic, irreducible pieces that the whole clever mechanism is built out of. Instead, you find 100 entirely different kinds of gear crammed in there, and a man beside you assures you, with a perfectly straight face, that not a single one of them can ever be taken apart. Every last one is a bottom piece, indivisible, final.
I would not believe him for a second. I would not stand there thinking, my word, what a rich and sophisticated watch this is. I would think, you have mislabeled your gears, my friend. There is simply no way a watch requires 100 different unopenable parts to tell the time. Something in there has been called basic that very plainly is not basic at all.
You would trust the watch less, not admire it more. That is the whole of the tell.
Exactly. 100 unopenable gears does not read as gloriously rich. It reads as somebody gave up opening them a good few steps too early.
And that is the honest reaction. It is the only sane reaction. And it is exactly the reaction the pile of particles ought to have provoked. And yet, quietly, for a good while, it did not. Because nature does not build with 100 different kinds of brick. It has never once, anywhere we have looked closely, shown us that it works that way. Every single time we have reached a true bottom, the list waiting there has been short. So one of two things simply had to be wrong. Either the word elementary was being handed out far, far too freely, or our entire picture of the bottom was broken.
One of those two simply has to give then. There is no cozy third option where 100 separate bottoms is just fine and good and we all move along.
There is no comfortable third door, and people hunted very hard for one, believe me, precisely because the other two both hurt to walk through.
And you cannot just quietly stretch the word to fit either. This is the part I really want to nail down. You cannot shrug and say, well, apparently the floor is a good deal bigger than we thought. Apparently there are 100 bottom pieces after all. How wonderfully rich, moving swiftly on. That is not a fix. That is just reaching up and switching the alarm off.
It is switching the alarm off and rolling over to go back to sleep in a burning house. 100 smallest things is not a rich answer. It is the sound of a question you have not answered yet, ringing and ringing. The word had gone soft in people's hands. It was getting stamped on things that nobody had actually cut open and looked inside. Nobody had truly reached the floor 100 separate times. They had just stopped cutting at each one and politely called wherever they happened to stop the bottom.
And I can feel exactly why nobody wanted to hear it. To admit the word is broken is to admit you do not actually know what the bottom of the world is made of. And that is after everyone had spent years being really rather sure that they did.
That is precisely why it sat there, festering, ever so politely, for far longer than it ever should have. Nobody on earth enjoys unlearning the floor they have been standing on so comfortably. It is a great deal easier to add one more drawer to the filing cabinet and one more label to the pile, and go on quietly calling the filing a science.
So we are properly stuck. The tidy world is gone, the flood will not turn off, the naming is a farce, and the one solid word that was holding the whole thing together has quietly cracked down the middle. This is the low point of the story. This is the bit where you tell me it looked completely hopeless.
This is the bit where I tell you it was very nearly the opposite of hopeless. But you have to turn the mess around and look at it from the right side to see why. Because everything you have just described sounds, said out loud, like an unmitigated catastrophe. And it is not. It is a clue. Very possibly the best kind of clue there is in all of science.
A clue. All right, I'm going to need you to genuinely earn that word. Because from where I am sitting, it looks like pure noise. 100 odd particles, scattered weights, scattered names, some raining out of the sky, and some flung out of the machines. What could possibly be the clue buried in that?
The word you just reached for. Random. Go and actually check whether it is random. That is the entire move, the hinge of the whole night. Because a heap that is truly random noise, there is nothing you can do with it. It just sits there mocking you. But sit yourself down with the 100 and start sorting them. the patient way you would sort any big, messy heap of anything, and they flatly refuse to stay random. They fall into families.
Families. Meaning what, exactly? That they clump together? That they are not just smeared evenly across some great range of weights?
They clump, and, this is the thing, they clump along lines that clearly mean something. Here is the cleanest split of the lot, the one you can almost feel with your hands. Some of these particles are stone deaf to that fierce pull inside the nucleus, the short, savage grip that packs a core together and holds it. Utterly deaf to it, aloof, standoffish. The electron is one of those, and so is its pointless heavy cousin, the muon. They simply do not feel that particular force at all.
And the others do feel it. The heavy, sociable ones.
The others are ruled by it. They crowd, they cling, they jostle. They are the heavy, sociable ones that jam themselves into the nucleus and take part in its whole life. So already, before you have done anything remotely clever, the mob has split itself down the middle into two great camps, the ones that feel the strong pull and the ones that serenely ignore it. That is not noise. Noise does not sort itself into two clean camps while you watch.
Meaning the crudest, laziest sort I could possibly perform on the mob already slices it clean in half.
The crudest sort you could dream up. And the pile answers you back. That is the precise instant the word random quietly dies on the table.
Okay, that is one cut. 2 families. But 2 families of 50 is still 100 particles. That cannot be the whole of the pattern.
It is nowhere near the whole of it. Within the camps, it just keeps going. Sort them by weight, and they do not smear out into a smooth smear. They land in tiers. Light ones here, middling ones there, heavy ones beyond, with real gaps of empty nothing between the tiers. Line those tiers up, lay the charge each one carries alongside, and you begin to see the same steps come round again. This weight paired with that charge, then a step along, then the same shape of pattern returning. Rows, columns, regular spacing. The 100 stops looking like a spilled heap and starts looking, unmistakably, like a chart somebody began drawing and never finished.
You said gaps between the tiers. Empty lanes, where no particle happens to sit at all.
Empty lanes, and a clean gap sitting in an otherwise tidy chart is the chart insisting, right out loud, that it is not merely noise.
Rows and columns, regular spacing, a hopeless list that suddenly falls into a grid. Why does that phrase set a bell ringing so loudly in my head that I can barely hear you over it?
Because physics has lived through this exact story once already, and won it outright. And you flagged the clue yourself earlier tonight and told me to hold on to it. Go all the way back to the elements. Before anyone knew the first thing about the inside of an atom, the elements were an absolute nightmare of a list. Dozens of them, and then more. No rhyme, no reason. A heavy silver metal here, a green choking gas there, a soft yellow crumbling solid over there. Just an ever-growing pile of utterly unrelated stuff that the world happened to be made of.
A zoo. The elements were their own particle zoo, before the particles.
Their very own zoo. And it grew, and grew, and carried exactly this same faint smell of, surely this cannot all be genuinely basic. And then somebody laid the whole unruly list out in the right order. And it snapped, clean into rows and columns. The properties came wheeling round again and again like clockwork. Every so many steps, another metal that behaves just like the last metal, another choking gas that behaves just like the last gas. The list had a hidden grid folded up inside it the entire time.
The periodic table.
The periodic table. A bewildering, overflowing heap of stuff, suddenly standing to attention in neat, repeating ranks. And here is the part that is the beating heart of the whole night, so I'm going to say it as carefully as I know how to say anything. Those rows were not decoration. They were not some happy coincidence that a clever person merely noticed and admired. Those rows turned out to be a fingerprint, the plain, visible fingerprint of an inside, of hidden parts.
Because the reason the elements march along in that repeating pattern in the first place
Is that an atom is not elementary at all. That is the reason, the entire reason. An atom has an inside, a few smaller pieces, the protons and neutrons and electrons, stacked up in different counts. Add one more proton, take one step along the row. Fill up a shell, and the whole pattern comes wheeling round again. The neat, repeating grid was the parts underneath, showing straight through to the surface. The pattern was the hidden machinery, waving up at us the whole time, and for years nobody read the wave.
then the rows were never really the discovery in themselves. They were the clue that pointed underneath the floor.
The rows were a message left lying on the surface, and the message, read properly, said only one thing. Look inside. There is an inside to look into.
So let me make absolutely sure I have the shape of this argument, because it is quietly doing everything now. A long, baffling list of things that every one of them looks basic. You sort them into the right order and they fall into repeating rows. And the rows are not the end of the story. The rows are a signpost, pointing straight down, saying, these things are not basic, they are built, they are a few smaller pieces in different arrangements, and that is precisely why they rhyme with each other.
That is the whole argument, and you have it perfectly clean. Now, one more time and slowly. Turn around and look back at the particle zoo. The 100 and more, every one of them stamped elementary. And ask the only honest question left standing on the table.
They fall into rows too. So, the last time a long list of basic things fell into rows, the rows meant it wasn't basic. The rows meant hidden parts inside. So maybe these 100 elementary particles are not elementary either. Maybe they are built out of a few genuinely small things arranged in different ways, taken in different counts.
There it is. There is the heresy the mess has been whispering the whole time. And notice, it is the very same trick you flagged and hung carefully on the wall an hour ago, before you had any idea you would need it. A few pieces, taken in different amounts, making an enormous crowd. Nearly 100 whole elements out of just 3 little pieces. So perhaps well over 100 particles out of some small number of even smaller pieces that we simply have not been introduced to yet.
And you keep saying smaller pieces, and very carefully not naming them. That is on purpose.
Studiously on purpose. Because tonight we have earned the question, and not yet the answer. The names come later, once we have honestly dug them out of the ground ourselves.
And that reframes the entire disaster. It turns it completely inside out. The 100 particles stop being an insult to the word elementary. They become the evidence. The very fact that there are far too many of them, and that they line themselves up into patterns, is the tell. It is exactly, precisely what a hidden layer looks like from the outside, before anyone has managed to find it.
That is the turn of the whole season, and you have walked yourself straight up onto it under your own steam. The mess is not the failure of the picture. The mess is the picture, seen from above, from the top of the stairs, before anyone has gone down. Too many elementary things, quietly sorting themselves into suggestive rows, is the exact footprint a deeper layer leaves in the snow. The very same footprint the elements left, long before anyone had the first idea how to crack open an atom.
Then here is the job. The reason there is a whole season stretching out ahead of us, and not just this one uneasy confession tonight, the job is to go down the stairs and find the smaller pieces. The ones that are actually doing the building.
The job is 2 questions, and they are the 2 questions this season is built to chase all the way down. First, what are the few small things underneath it all? And second, every bit as hard, what are the rules? What are the rules that let a small number of pieces come together and make well over 100 different particles, the way a handful of pieces makes 100 elements? Finding the pieces is only ever half the battle. You have to find the grammar too, the rules that let a few make so very many.
2 questions then, the pieces and the grammar. And I would bet good money the grammar is the far harder half of the 2.
Far harder. Anyone at all can write out a list of bricks. It is the rules of assembly, what is allowed to join what and how, that took the real bruising fight.
And I want you to be honest with me about how that hunt actually goes, because I can already feel the shape of a tidy story where the clever people spot the pattern, snap their fingers once, and out drops the beautiful answer before the tea has gone cold. That is not how it went, is it? Tell me it was not that easy.
No, and I would be lying straight to your face if I dressed it up for you. It took years. Long, grinding, frustrating years, thick with wrong turns and false patterns. Grids that looked exactly like the answer and were not. Orderings that seemed to click satisfyingly into place and then fell to bits on closer inspection. Blind alleys that swallowed whole careers whole. The clue was real, but a clue is not an answer. A clue is only a direction in which to start digging, and the digging was hard and slow and wrong about as often as it was right.
And when they finally got down to the bottom, the real bottom, the actual smaller pieces, was it beautiful? Did the whole mess finally resolve into something as clean and closed as the old beloved fort?
Here is the honest thing, and I very much want to leave it honest rather than tidy. When those smaller pieces were at last run to ground, the new list was not some flawless little jewel that makes you gasp and reach for a pen. It is shorter, a very great deal shorter, and that is the real victory. That shortening is enormous, but it is not tidy in the way the 4 felt tidy. It has its own odd corners, its own leftover questions that we are honestly still chewing on to this very day. We traded a 100-piece puzzle for a much smaller one. We did not, in the end, trade it for perfection.
And how long did all of that actually take, roughly? From first staring at the mess to finally holding the smaller pieces in your hand.
The better part of a whole generation, with the answer, for long stretches of it, sitting in more or less plain view, while nobody alive could quite bring themselves to read it. And that is the part people always forget about a clue. It does not arrive with its own solution, helpfully stapled to the back of it. It arrives with a direction, that way, downward, and nothing more than a stubborn, unproven promise that the digging is going to turn out to be worth the ache.
And somehow that makes me trust it more, not less. If the final answer had come out gorgeous and complete and gift-wrapped, I would suspect somebody of tidying up the room before the guests arrived. A shorter list with a few genuinely strange corners left standing in it, that sounds far more like something actually true.
That is exactly the right instinct, and it is the one to carry with you through every episode this season. We are not out hunting for a pretty story to tell. We are hunting for the true one, the few real pieces and the real rules, warts and odd corners and all. And this is the single thing I most want you to walk out with tonight, underneath all the comedy of the alphabet and all the dread of the count. The zoo was never a disaster. An overflowing, embarrassing, unnameable pile of elementary things is not what failure looks like. It is what a hidden layer looks like, from the outside, in the last few moments before somebody finds the door.
A door. So not a brick wall we ran headlong into and knocked ourselves out on. A door we simply have not opened yet.
A door, and a milling crowd of 100 is precisely what a door looks like, from this side of it, before anyone has found the handle.
The mess is a clue. Not a mess we have to apologize for and quietly sweep under the rug. A mess that is trying, patiently, to tell us something, if only we will read it as a fingerprint instead of as a stain on the tablecloth.
The mess is a clue. Keep that one. Every single other thing this season hangs off it.
Then, before we close it out for tonight, point me at the door. If the pattern really is a fingerprint of hidden parts, and the job is to go and find the parts, where do we even begin looking? There are 100 particles down there. Which one do you pick up and crack open first?
And this is where the whole thing turns genuinely, wonderfully strange. Because the first place to look is very nearly the last place on Earth you would ever think to look. Not one of the exotic newcomers out of the sky. Not some flickering, heavy stranger fresh out of the machines. The most ordinary, solid, respectable brick in the entire set. The one piece nobody ever once doubted. The one that you, right now, are actually made of.
You mean the proton?
I mean, the proton. The heavy little lump sitting at the heart of every atom in your body. The one single piece that everybody was dead certain was one simple thing. A plain marble you could not open, the very definition of a building block. That one. That is where the crack runs.
Oh, you cannot possibly say that and then just stop and reach for your coat. You are telling me the proton, the solid brick, the thing I am built out of, the least mysterious object in the whole story, is where the entire disguise finally comes apart?
The proton is not a lump. That is next time, and I will not spoil a scrap more than the bare shape of it. But the shape alone is astonishing. The proton and the neutron sitting right there beside it are each not one thing but three. Three smaller pieces, bound up tight inside, a brand new kind of building block we had never once met, hiding in the most familiar object in all the world. And they arrive carrying with them the single strangest rule in the whole of physics.
Which is?
That you can never, ever pull one of them out to have a proper look at it. Not because we are not clever enough yet, or our machines are still too feeble, because nature herself flatly forbids it. There are three things inside the proton, and you are not permitted to reach in, take one out, and set it down on the table in front of you. Not now, not ever.
Three things inside the proton that you are never allowed to take out and look at. That is a genuinely outrageous place to leave a person hanging, and you know full well that it is. But look, I walked in through that door tonight thinking matter was 4 neat pieces on the back of my hand, a finished, almost boring little world I could teach a child before supper and tuck it into bed. And you have spent the whole hour drowning that world under 100 uninvited strangers, ransacking the Greek alphabet to name the crowd, cracking clean in half the one solid word that was holding them all together. And then, right down at the very bottom of the mess, you have shown me the shape of a door. The pattern is a fingerprint. The 100 are a disguise. The few real pieces are down there in the dark, waiting, and the very first of them is hiding inside the most ordinary thing I am made of. So I will take the door, gladly, and I will carry the question down the stairs with me. Next time, the three things inside you.